have Adrian Villar, an engineer specialized in aerodynamics and with extensive experience working in Formula One. Adrian is an instructor at the Motorsport Academy and also is the managing director at V-Fluid Technology, a consultancy specialized in aerodynamics. And we're very happy to have you today with us, Adrian. Hello, how are you?
Hello. Hi, how are you?
Very good, thank you. So there's something that I want to ask you maybe later on in the interview, which is related to uncertainty, because you've been going through different levels of uncertainty in different Formula One teams. This is something that it's very normal in the industry, of course, but because you've been through this in the past, we are sure that your experience is going to be very valuable to a lot of people today. But first of all, let's talk about you. Let's talk about your experience. And I would like to ask you first, who's Adrian Villar? Where do you come from?
So as Gerard said, I'm Adrian Villar. I'm actually from Venezuela. So I actually graduated in Venezuela in the university. And basically that's where it all started, because when I entered the university, I decided to become a member of the Formula SAE team of the university. At that time, the team was pretty much starting. It was only the third year or the fourth year of the team. So it was a growing team and a learning experience for everyone. But it absolutely changed my life in that sense, because it gave me a lot of experience. So Formula Student and for Formula SAE was basically what started my career in that sense. It was what drove me to become a motorsports engineer and aerodynamics engineer. I was there for 4 years actually. I was working on the engine team. So yeah, it was very interesting on that, and that's what got me started on CFD and computational fluid dynamics, because I was doing a few simulations for the engine inlet and cooling and so on. Mm-hmm. And then basically by the end of it, I had decided that I wanted to pursue the career in motorsports. So that's
what year was that?
That was 2008. So that was a year before I graduated. So that's where I decided to go to Germany for a year, or with the university, like somewhat like an Erasmus program, but for international students. I spent a year there in Stuttgart. I had the opportunity to do my thesis with VW in Wolfsburg. And that was again in CFD. So yeah, it was quite an interesting project and a really good experience. But then, yeah, I decided to, after I graduated from university, I decided to go to do a master's degree in motorsports. And I went to Oxford Brookes University, which was also a pretty good experience overall. It served as a trampoline, basically, to get me into Formula One. Mm-hmm. I think we were a bit lucky as well that year, because it's when we had 3 new teams, so there were a bit more. It was more teams looking for new people. So I had an interview with Caterham F1. They offered me the opportunity, and that's how everything started, basically.
Very good. So before we jump onto your professional career, so to speak, how was your experience at Oxford Brookes? Because obviously you spent some time at Formula SAE in Venezuela with your team, which was a fairly new team. It was the early days probably of the competition as well. And you moved to Germany to do some internship or research in CFD with VW. And then you move into Oxford Brookes. So you already had a decent experience in the fields of aerodynamics and also in CFD. And even so, you decided to specialize with a master's degree in motorsports.
When you want to be in motorsports, whatever area you want to work on, it's good to have experience on the specialist area, but it's also very good and very important to have an idea of how everything works and how everything connects to each other. So because that way you can use that knowledge to and apply to your area, and I think that makes a massive difference. So when you're an aerodynamicist, for example, knowing about how suspension works and how the tires work and how important that is, I think that helps you have a broader idea of how to get performance out of a car, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's why one of the main reasons why I decided to go and do a motorsports engineering course rather than specializing on aerodynamics, for example. And yeah, I think Oxford Brookes was quite different to what I had experienced before. Like universities in Venezuela, for example, they tend to be very theoretical.
Mm-hmm.
So you have, for example, to graduate in engineering, you have to study at least 5 years. So and in my university, which was quite demanding, it was 3 trimesters. And in each trimester, you studied maybe 4 to 6 lessons, different classes, and you had 3 or 4 exams per each one or projects. So you have a lot of theory and not much on the experimental side, on the practical side.
Mm-hmm.
And Oxford Brookes is a bit quite the opposite on that sense. So it does give you perhaps a little bit less theory what I would have liked, but the experimental, the not experimental, but like practical side of the education was really good. And I think that's where the main advantage of that master's.
Okay,
I would say.
very good. And so how about your dissertation? Of course, you were already quite focused in aerodynamics and CFD. What was the topic of your dissertation?
Yeah, so my dissertation, because I wanted to continue working on CFD and go towards aerodynamics, I decided to specialize it on basically that. So I did a master's thesis on a GP2 car and the development of an analysis of the aerodynamic performance of a GP2 car, and also take basically those results and use it for lap time simulation. So it was getting the aerodynamic side and the dynamic side together, and the vehicle dynamic side together into one thing. It gave me quite a lot of perspective. It helped me understand a lot about CFD on its own. However, for example, I look back now, obviously after having a lot more experience, and I look at what I did. I was like, oh, I was so wrong. But it was a good
Part of the
foundation.
learning process, probably.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how you learn, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Very good. So GP2, for those who don't know, it's what today is called Formula 2. It was renamed, right? Very good. So then that was your master's degree done once you finished the dissertation. So what happened next?
So basically, after I graduated from the master's, I decided to apply to pretty much everywhere. And I was lucky to be called by Caterham F1. At the time it was Lotus Racing. So I went to Norwich. I remember that traveling there was a nightmare. But yeah, I think the interview was pretty okay. It wasn't what I expected, to be honest. Like, I think the person that interviewed me it was funny because the person that interviewed me was one of them was quite like a good, easy interviewer. The other one was who ended up being my boss at the beginning. He's a nice person, but during the interview, he was just completely blank.
It was kind of a good cop, bad cop situation.
Yeah, exactly. So it was just like I finished an answer, and he was like, and writing something down. I was like, oh. But I'm guessing the whole interview was quite interesting because it wasn't too much about knowledge. It was about interpreting stuff and see how I understood not only the basics of aerodynamics, but how to apply them to the car. So it was interesting in that sense. It was a good interview.
Right.
So yeah, I got the letter of acceptance a month after, and yeah, it was good.
Very good. So how was the process itself? Was it like comprised of different phases? Did you have?
No, this one with Lotus Racing, I think because it was a fairly small team and a new team, they didn't have too much of a process at that stage. But it was a single interview at that point. So yeah, it wasn't. There wasn't. I think other teams had different processes and stuff, but it was more the settled teams like Mercedes or something like that, for example.
Yeah, very good. And how long did it last? Just out of curiosity.
I think that was like an hour and a half. So yeah, they're usually. I've been to a few interviews after that, and they tend to be quite long. I've had interviews of 2 hours, but and yeah, and very different types of interviews. Some of them can be quite stressing.
Yeah. I can imagine. I can imagine. So once you got the offer letter, what happened next? So what was your role within the team?
So when I started obviously at the bottom. I started as a junior CFD engineer actually. So I wasn't going to do too much aerodynamics, but yeah, I think that the role quickly changed because they saw the necessity of increasing the development. So at that stage, the process that we had in CFD wasn't automated, and I think most teams didn't have like a really good automated process back then, and that was
So
I don't know.
when was this? Just so we can like
So that's
position.
2010. So that's 10
Okay.
years ago.
Right.
I think in the last 10 years that has changed massively. So yeah, when I started, basically the team had CFD engineers that were assisting on the development of the car, and that I was one of them. And then the wind tunnel aerodynamics, which basically took our results to and the analysis that we did on results to take those trends to the wind tunnel. So the wind tunnel and CFD were completely separate parts or areas of development. So that, at the beginning, I was doing that. It was a fairly manual work in terms of creating every single job manually and so on. So we had a few macros that someone else had done when I arrived, and so submitting a case could take maybe 2-3 hours. You could do several at the same time if you were fast enough, but yeah, it was still a lengthy work, a lengthy job in that sense.
Right. And I remember, so this is quite an interesting experience because it's not very often, as you were saying, that you get new teams coming into the championship. And Caterham or Team Lotus back then was one of the ones that was built from the ground up. So there was nothing and everything needed to be done. You were joining as a junior engineer, trying to help build that team. This must have...
I've done that. I've done that a few times.
Yeah, very good. But how did the team spirit feel? What was the mood within
the team spirit was awesome, to be honest. Like it was, I think, because the team was based in Norwich, so it was the only team around. So everyone that joined that team was coming from somewhere else. No one was originally from.
To provide some context, where are normally based the Formula One teams?
Right. So the teams in the UK are normally based in what's called Motorsport Valley, which is basically the epicenter of you could say that it's Oxford. And then you have McLaren in Woking. And that Norwich was basically I think a former capital of England quite a long time ago. It's about 3 or 4 hours away from Oxford. So basically, everyone that went to that team had to move to Norwich. So basically, no one had any friends, basically, and basically everyone became friends in there. So it was we used to have go out for dinner, and it was 25 of us. so yeah, it was a good experience in that sense. So everyone became quite close, and everyone was very committed to the team. Everyone saw it as a common mission to beat Marussia at the time and Hispania Racing. So yeah, it was very good. It was the team view and the team feel. It was quite rewarding in that sense.
Very. So then, from junior CFD at Caterham, what happened after? You got a promotion?
Yeah, so I was in Caterham in Lotus Racing. I was a junior CFD engineer, and I took on when I started after 6 months. I think I took on developing all the front brake cooling. We were having some major issues with them back then. So I was the first person to do that in the team, and brake cooling. It's quite a complex area to work on, especially because the CAD is horrible, and I didn't have that much CAD experience back then, and so I had to get really good really quickly on it. and it was a mixture of CFD simulations with aerodynamics, but also a bit of heat modeling. I had to do as well, talk to the track engineers, and I had to do experimental testing on a brake dyno, and so yeah, it was a very interesting, very good job. I think since I took it so much into my heart that I had to do it properly, I think the team was quite happy with my job. Even the technical director spoke to me several times about everything. So yeah, I got promoted to be an aerodynamics engineer, and then things started changing within the team, because I think back then that's when the regulations changed and we couldn't use the wind tunnel the wind tunnel as much.
When was this?
So basically, I think it was 2012, 2013. So I was already an aerodynamicist, but then my job changed from being a CFD engineer to being an aerodynamicist. So I started doing wind tunnel testing and aero development as well. And being a small team is quite nice in that sense, because you get to do a bit of everything all the time. So within my first 4 years in Caterham, I had worked in every single part of the car, basically. So yeah, it was a great experience in that sense.
So you had a great deal of exposure to different areas of the car development, but also like some testing. What you were saying about the brakes, I think it's quite an interesting aspect of your early stage career. You were really young, not a lot of professional experience, but you were already like doing a lot of things, from wind tunnel testing, CFD simulation for the brake cooling, and also the dyno testing with which was the supplier?
We were using AP Racing at the moment, at that stage, and so we went to their brake dyno. And as well, the dyno it's not the most advanced dyno there is at the moment, but it did quite a good job in terms of providing the results that we needed. And I remember the first time we went to the brake dyno, we had to be there for a couple of days. And the first day I was with my senior engineer there, and the first day he was basically he was responsible for everything. We had an error, like a big something that we missed. We had a failure in the test, so we broke one of the brake discs. So basically, that night we had to rebuild everything. Then the next day we had to pretty much redo everything. And all of a sudden, my senior engineer was like, I'm not feeling really well. I have a 40-degree fever. So basically, with a year of experience, I had to be responsible for the entire test for a day. So yeah, that was interesting. It went well though.
Good. I'm sure you learned a lot with that experience, and that happens very often, right? That there's all of a sudden you're done with all these workloads and everything has to happen now. So you just have to roll up your sleeves and.
No, and I had guys, the guys that were helping us with the actual test and the building of the actual rig. They had, I don't know, 15, 20 years of experience looking at me like, what do we do now? So yeah, it was character building.
Really good. So what happened next then after that stage?
So yeah, after that, I think it was the demise of Caterham. That was unfortunate because at that stage, at least in the aero department, we were really heading in the right direction. And not saying just in the development side of things, but the way we worked as a team. We were getting quite good tools. We were developing quite good tools inside the team and so on. So the actual development rate was increasing. So yeah, it was unfortunate in that sense, but from every bad or poor situation, something better comes along. So it's just about a matter of staying positive and taking taking advantage of the time.
Absolutely, totally agree with you. So then you had a short stint in automotive, and then you managed to go back into Formula One, which was something you really wanted to do. So
yeah.
How was this experience of starting again in another Formula One team, which you will say which one it was, but it's different joining an F1 team as a recent graduate with zero experience to joining one having already some experience. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I joined Manor F1 after it changed from Marussia, and it was basically it was also starting from zero. Basically, it had some of the tools that they adopted from Marussia F1, but everything was pretty much new. So it was interesting. I was there. I joined the team as a senior aerodynamicist. So yeah, my responsibilities changed a little bit because I had to take responsibility for the more junior aerodynamicists, sort of act like a bit of a guide, especially at the beginning, and teach them about CAD or CFD and how things work and how we did things. And it sounds like 4 years experience may not be enough, but I think when you're in a small team, it's like dog years. So every year it counts as double. So yeah, it was also a very good experience. I think Manor was a top team to work in. So we started at Silverstone in a small office, and then we moved to our own headquarters. And I was working on the rear team of the car. So the development is usually structured in 3 teams. So you have front, middle, and rear of the car. And so I was working on the rear, which is rear wing, diffuser, and so on. And it was a team of 3, I think, when I started, and it grew to 6 or 7.
How big was the team overall?
When I joined, I think we were maybe 40 people. Wow. I think it grew up to be about 200 or maybe 250. I can't remember. Maybe 300. I don't know.
And that's kind of a normal size or a common size for a small team, right? Or a small team.
Yeah.
So I think now things have changed quite a lot. There are not such small teams anymore, I think, but back then used to be common.
Yeah. So yeah, in Manor, the experience was fairly similar in terms of what we did. What was very different was the tunnels that we used, and somewhat the CFD tools that we used, because we were using different software, different wind tunnels, and so on. So it did give me quite a lot of perspective on that side as well, which is very important because it's just experience. You realize how different some things can be. Like from one wind tunnel to the other, it's massive, the difference that you can see, and from one CFD model to the CFD software or CFD model to the next, you can see massive differences as well. So it was interesting in that sense. It's starting out almost from scratch in what you believed or your experience in that sense. So as an aerodynamicist with experience, you do realize immediately where some areas are the simulations are wrong. You take that from the wind tunnel test, and you start questioning the wind tunnel test as well. And so you start trying things to make sure where you find where are the areas that you can actually rely on for each thing.
Right, because I guess from the point of view of also Manor being a small team as was Team Lotus, later Caterham, and they were looking to grow the team. So when it comes to the type of talent that they need, having someone like you that has gone through building or being part of a team that has pretty much nothing and there's so much to be done, that already adds a lot of value to them from that point of view, right?
I think so. I mean, obviously, I wasn't the only one, but I think a lot of the people that were part of Manor since the beginning were people that had gone through a build-up of a new team. So in Marussia, in Manor, sorry, everything, all the tools grew or were built already to a much higher usability and expectation than at the beginning, for example, when I was in Caterham, because people already had the experience of going through that. So yeah, it definitely, and it was a mixture of Marussia experience and Caterham experience. And I think, for example, Marussia had a lot, just as an example, in the Aero team, Marussia had a very good wind tunnel data tool, and Caterham had a very good CFD data tool for analysis. So I think with the experience of both sides, we ended up trying to merge everything. It worked quite well in that
Mhm.
sense.
Very
And I
good.
think
No, I was about to say, I'm curious to know what wind tunnels you use, because both Caterham and Marussia didn't have their own wind tunnels because they're very expensive testing facilities. So
yeah.
I wonder which wind tunnels you guys used.
So in Caterham, we started using the Wind Tunnel 2 Wind Tunnel 1 from Williams, which is their older wind tunnel and it's smaller, but it was still used for Formula One development. It still has a very good moving ground belt. It's just the size is a bit small for a Formula One car. So it's something that we quickly realized afterwards, and so the team was able to make an investment and move to the Toyota wind tunnel at
Mm.
Cologne, and that was an incredible thing in all around because it forced the team to be more efficient in wind tunnel testing because we had to travel to Cologne. So everyone started just working to deadlines and so on in a way that we were not doing that before. So every time we arrived at Cologne, everything was completely ready to go. So everything was a lot more efficient. Even though we started testing, I think, less hours, we had already tested things in CFD prior to going. So the development rate was pretty much the same, even though we had half of the time in the wind tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
And the results as well were increased or improved overall, and the correlation to the track improved because the wind tunnel was significantly better in that sense. Because there are two main things a wind tunnel can do when you go bigger is basically you reduce the blockage ratio of the test of the model test of the model, sorry. So you get closer results to reality. But one of the main things is that you can, in this case, for example, for us, we were able to go from a 50% model to a 60% model, and that allowed us to fit in active suspension system for the model. So basically, all the trends that we saw between the diffuser and the wheel were different, and they were closer to what we saw on the track. The drag was the drag benefit. I mean, it was the drag delta that we saw from going to the Williams wind tunnel 2 to wind tunnel 1, sorry, to Toyota was big as well. So yeah, everything started to make more sense with regards to the track. So yeah, that was in terms of the experience, it was quite eye-opening in terms of because sometimes you read this in a book and you go like, okay, but when you actually are developing and you see that massive change, you go, that's what the book wanted. why that's why the book wanted me to read this, or the author.
Yeah, so I guess it's one of those things that putting the extra economic effort and putting some more money into the development of the race car. When it comes to aerodynamics, having a very good wind tunnel facility, it's really key, right? For exactly what you were saying first, because you're allowed to go from 50% to 60%, which has its own challenges as well. It costs money to build. You need a lot of people focused on designing the new model, but the bigger it is, the closer to reality it will be. So the data, it's more transferable. It's more there's more parallelism between race car and the model. And I think what you said as well in terms of being able to package more complex systems, I think that also it's key.
Yeah.
You mentioned active suspension, which is something that all Formula One teams, if they want to be at the top, they have to have. But there are things which are more basic, like being able to fit more pressure scanners, so that you have more pressure points.
Yes, that's definitely true. Yes.
Very good. Yeah, and it's also funny that you mentioned the Toyota wind tunnel, because they have two wind tunnels, right? From there, that could be for another interview, right? But Toyota spent so much money in the Formula One program when they were competing in the championship that they had two wind tunnels, which are probably even today, about 15 years later, they remain at the top 5 of the best wind tunnels available for aero development in race cars, and they have basically all the toys. And I think I would say that over 50% of the engineers in Formula One have been there at some point.
I certainly work with a lot of people that were in Toyota prior to me going there. So
Really good. That's a very interesting experience. So then what happened to Manor? Of course, for people familiar with the story, they might already know, but there might be people who are not familiar. So what happened?
yeah, so Manor also went under after the first couple of years, well, the first year of racing, and that was as well. It was a shame because we were working well as a team, but it's one of those things that you cannot do anything about it. I think the owner at the time wanted it was a business from his side, and I don't know. I'm guessing it wasn't working very well for him. But yeah, as everything, when something when something happens, you have to take other opportunities. So when Manor went under, I joined Dyson Automotive,
Mm-hmm.
or at that stage it was just a secret, completely secret project. I was almost not even. I went in not knowing what it was about, to be honest.
What year was that?
That was 2017. No,
2017.
yes, 2017.
So
Yes.
that's when the Dyson electric car project began.
No. The project started a year or a year and a half before. The
Okay.
thing is that they struggled a lot to hire people before then. So when I joined, it was not even. I think it was 100 people in total after almost 2 years, because they didn't want to tell the world what they were doing. And I think maybe half of that people were from Dyson, from the other side of Dyson, so they moved them to the automotive side. But I think they realized that when Manor went down, that they had an opportunity, and they hired a few people from Manor, at least from the aero department. Well, it was mainly me at the beginning, and then we started sort of looking guys that I knew were really good. So they started interviewing as well, and we built a small aero team from the ground up as well. Again, well,
So third
that
time
was
like building another team.
yeah. But this one was properly from the ground up, because when I joined, we were 2 people, and there was absolutely nothing. There were no tools whatsoever. We had to change CFD software. We didn't have a wind tunnel test or a model, so we had to do everything. So it was a very, very rewarding experience in that sense. It was very interesting, and it was good because most of the guys that we work with, or that were part of the team, we were experienced in F1, so they were used to working with that type of efficiency. So everything that we did was
With the same
thinking in
mindset.
that. Yeah, exactly. And I think it's the tools that we created I think they were even better than some of this stuff I've ever seen in F1 or heard from other teams, to be honest, because obviously you have more than one problem in automotive to resolve in terms of CFD. So it was interesting in that sense, because we were able to do all the types of simulations, brake simulations, unsteady simulations, transient simulations, things like that which in F1 you tend not to do, because you have the regulations. So yeah, Dyson was very interesting.
Yeah, and it makes me think it's a bit of a shame also what happened, right? That I mean, we know recently, just in a few months ago, they announced that they were canceling the project definitely, and it really is a pity because it sounds like there were a lot of talented people. They had like really big goals with this electric car, and it really could have been something very special.
Yeah, I think the car, in terms of the technical side and what they were trying to do was quite out there. So the expectations were really high for everything. From the aero side, they definitely gave us quite a difficult target, especially on the size of the car and the characteristics of the car. I still cannot say much of it, but yeah, it was demanding for sure. So yeah, towards the end, I think because of all the processes that we had and the way that we were working, we still managed to achieve that target. And yeah, I think that was very a great success for us. So I think a couple of weeks or 3 weeks before they announced the closure, I think that's when we hit the target for the first time. so, so yeah. I think I take the experience with I remember it with a great view on it. It was very good. A very good experience. A great team to work with.
Something very special for sure. And I presume you were also doing some wind tunnel testing.
Yes. So when I went to Dyson, I was basically leading the CFD side of things, but because it's a small team, I still had to do aero development and go to the wind tunnel. And so yeah, we were testing. I can't say where, to be honest, I think. But we were testing a good facility. And
in the UK?
So, but yeah, sorry?
You can say it was in the UK or in Germany, or what country was it in?
I'm guessing, yeah. It was in the UK, so we didn't have to take an airplane. But yeah, we were doing a mixture of obviously CFD and wind tunnel testing as well. But we had more. We were relying more on CFD than on wind tunnel testing, especially because for wind tunnel testing you need a really big team to do the models and everything. Plus the rate of change of the model was, I think it was even faster than in F1 somewhat, and it didn't only depend on us in that sense.
Yeah.
Because it was also dependent on the studio guys doing the actual shape and look of the car.
Very good. So then that meant that you started in 3 very young teams. There was a lot to do on the 3 of them, 2 in Formula One in automotive, but an incredibly innovative and like really interesting project from the technical point of view and probably from the business perspective as well. But that's another story. But 3 of them, of course, this gives you an extremely unique experience. And I guess that's why you decided to start your own consultancy.
Yeah, so at the beginning of this year, I decided to start my own consultancy, and so trying to take my experience and use it for fluid dynamic simulations and anything that becomes experimental testing as well, CAD design on that side of things. So trying to basically whatever the clients need to try and accommodate to those needs as well, and always provide a really good service and a good outcome. But I'm also trying to go into the training side of things and education side of things, because I think that's one of the key areas of any industry. And yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I'm here with you.
Very good. And so tell us about like one project that you might have done already. What was it about, or what are you doing? Something that you can tell us, of course. Some things might be confidential.
Yeah. So one of the projects that I've worked with, that I worked in, it was actually also for a company. It's a private company, but it's a motorsports team in Spain, and they have a motorsports master as well. And part of the master, they do aerodynamics, and they have a small wind tunnel that they wanted to use to do like a lab test for the students. So it was me designing, fixing a few minor things on the wind tunnel to put it into a good working range, and also designing a setup of a wing profile, but built in the way that would have been built in for example, Formula One, so that the students would also get that not only the actual results, but also the way of working and manufacturing and designing. So it was doing that, putting a bit of everything together and doing the CFD for that as well, so that you would have the comparison between the two worlds. So yeah, it was quite an interesting job as well, because obviously as an aerodynamicist, you don't actually do the technical side of the wind tunnel. You already have the data and everything's working fine, and if something goes wrong, the wind tunnel operators and the providers of the wind tunnel are the ones that do all the work. But so yeah, it was it was a different experience as well.
Very good. So it's good that you're interested in the education sector as well, or like trying to translate your experience into kind of sharing and inspiring young engineers so they can learn from you. And I think it's very interesting also that you've prepared the course for our academy and it's already available. Tell us a little bit about the course, what's it called, and what are the modules within the course?
Yeah, so the course is basically like a starting up course for race car aerodynamics. So it's called Introduction to Race Car Aerodynamics, and it has 3 different modules. So the first one talks about basically the structure of an aerodynamics department, how they work, how the different areas of the team or the department work together to basically to achieve the same unique goal, which is more performance of the car. And then the second part of that module it talks about why basically aerodynamics is so important in race car aerodynamics. So we talk a little bit about tires, we talk about the actual aerodynamic forces, how they're used, aerodynamic efficiency, and that side of things. So it's basically the fundamentals of why and how aerodynamics does what it does for a race car. Then the second module is mainly wind tunnel testing. And as an introductory course, it goes, I try to explain the different types of wind tunnels and the different tools that you have in the wind tunnel, because I feel, even though I think some things you can find still in a book, but not. I try to give it a perspective that comes from my experience and how that has affected me in my experience. And I think that's where the course is different to anything you'll find online or in a book.
or even in university as well.
Or even in universities, yes. And then the third part of the third module of the course is related to CFD as well, from an aerodynamicist perspective, and how it is used in the industry, why it is used like that, even though there are a lot other different tools that could be used. So I tried to speak a bit about the different types of CFD simulations or CFD methods that you could use, but obviously focus on the one that is used in the industry. And there's reasons, very important reasons of why that is.
Very good. Who do you think this kind of course would benefit the most?
I think it will benefit students that obviously students that have been or are in university, that have a background on engineering, more specifically perhaps towards mechanical engineering, aeronautical engineering. What we're trying to do is obviously communicate some information that you cannot easily find in a book or in a university already. So they do have to have some background and some knowledge and some basic knowledge to understand everything that is on the course and to get basically the importance of it. So people that are informed students, I think it could benefit not only this course, but the ones that we're thinking about releasing later on. And anyone who wants to learn and about race car aerodynamics, I think it's an incredible, very interesting field.
I think it's something very unique as well to have someone with your experience really sharing what you've been through and all your knowledge. All the inside information is something really exclusive and not seen before. So I would recommend to anybody who is very interested to look into website that we have, motorsportengineer.net. Look into our Motorsport Academy, and you will be able to find Adrian's course, which is, as we said, really, really interesting. So we are running out of time. I don't want to end this without asking you two questions, right? And I think one is aimed at helping young students and young engineers, and the other one is aimed at helping more experienced professionals in the area of Formula One. So the first one is for the young students, young engineers. What advice or what tips would you give these extremely passionate, extremely keen engineers who really want to start their career either in Formula One or other forms of top level motorsports, and they're looking at ways of doing it? What would you tell them today with all the experience that you have?
I think especially at this time where F1 is going through a bit of a rough patch, and all motorsports is going through a bit of a rough patch. I think, or at least I hope, it's just a bump in the road. I think motorsports is going to resume, and things will go back to normal at some point. But I think in the meantime, the main thing is that first of all, they're clear of what they want to do in terms of what area they want to specialize on.
Mm-hmm.
I think even though it's important to know a bit of everything to understand how everything works, how one thing affects the other, I think it's still important to try to specialize on an area, say aerodynamics or design, and try to get experience from either courses. I think one of the main things about, for example, the time that we've been locked in our homes for the quarantine, is that people use their time wisely to grow on their skills. I think that's really important. Like, for example, when I finished when Caterham went down, I decided to do a course on Java, and that was something that opened quite a lot of doors for me after. I used it quite a lot, for example, at Dyson, to do the entire CFD process. It's any skill that you learn, any way you can do it, is never the wrong thing to do. And if you do have an opportunity to go into another industry that provides the same or a similar type of experience, it will still be a good experience if you want to then try again later on and enter motorsports. You can do, for example, CFD. You can do CFD in other areas. They are very interesting as well, and they will give good experience for anyone that wants to join motorsports later on the aerodynamics department. So. Mm-hmm. So the main thing is to stay active, stay positive, and take advantage of the time as much as you can.
So to summarize, I think basically you've been saying three things. The first one is about education. Education remains really important, either at university or doing online courses or staying relevant with any other types of resources. The other one is experience and trying to get transferable skills. So that is skills in industries or companies that you may get some experience that will be relevant to Formula One later on. And the third one is, of course, remaining active and staying positive, which I think it's a really good advice to anybody. The second part, or the second question that I wanted to ask you, and I think it's relevant nowadays for some people who are experienced engineers, professionals working in Formula One or other forms of motorsports, is that they might be going through some times of uncertainty, facing some maybe redundancies or companies closing down. Of course, your experience, it's really, really invaluable because, I mean, unfortunately, you've had to go through these 3 times, right? So, and maybe going through these once, it's really hard, but hopefully going through something like this 3 times gets to a point that you can take some learnings and look ahead. So what could you say for these people that unfortunately are going through these times?
Yeah, I think in this time specifically, I think it's one thing is important to understand that maybe or probably the situation that you're in has nothing to do with you. So get that out of your head. because obviously that will eat you up. And is, as I said before, is very important to stay with a positive mind, because it will affect the way that you think. It will affect the way that you work and live. I think from my experience, I've always been quite cautious in terms of the way I do things overall. Like, so when Caterham went down was the first time that it happened, and obviously that was one of those that it affected me the most. I think the other two was significantly easier because I had been through that, and I knew my capabilities and that I could provide.
Yeah, so you're more confident in your own abilities.
Yeah, exactly. But something that helped me when I was in Caterham, when after Caterham, was basically to stay occupied, even if it's doing things that are for myself at home, or doing an online course. And also being, the thing is that I've always been had a mindset to be prepared, or to be in a good position in terms of my entire life. Like, for example, economically, having some savings for anything that could happen, just to make sure that, you know, we could be in a position that we wouldn't have to worry too much about that, in terms of it going really bad, or that it could turn really bad. So that alone for me was very important, and gave me peace of mind when this happened. I was like, okay, I mean, we have to buckle up a little bit, but it's okay. And I think that's something that you have to take into account for the future. But overall, I think it's using the time that you've got to, and turn it into something positive. Even if you already have some experience and you can create a new company, that would be great. But yeah, there are many things that you just have to approach everything with a positive attitude, I think.
Yeah. So to summarize again, as I did before, basically the first one is, it's not because of you, right? That's the main thing.
Yeah.
And I think it can be really hard to really realize that that's the case, because you might have been working really hard, investing all your time to the projects for a given company. But yeah, I think what you said is, take it from another perspective. It's not really anything to do with you. You're perfectly a very good professional, so it's not like that. The second one is to use your time wisely, try to retrain or try to learn as much as possible. And the third one is to stay positive again, because like new things will come, definitely.
Yeah, I think overall it's also important to manage your stress and your state of mind. And there are many different ways of doing that, and everyone can do it in a different way. But the important thing is to have that in mind as well, like to actually have that, take that into account as well.
Yeah. Very good, Adrian. Thank you very much for being with us today. I think your experience is going to be incredible, and it will inspire a great deal of people out there. We're very happy that you were here with us. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure, actually.
Thank you, Adrian.